All right, get ready, because today we're diving headfirst into one of the hottest debates in football, maybe all of sports, really. We're talking about the best NFL wide receivers of all time. And we're not just throwing out names. No, we've got some serious ammo for this discussion. We're going deep into a top 10 best NFL wide receivers of all time list from the top10s.com. And the best part, it's not just a list. It's full of comment from fans arguing their picks, sometimes getting pretty heated.
I can imagine. Passionate fans, strong opinions. It's a recipe for some entertaining back and forth.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking Joe status here, the greatest of all time, so you know people are going to bring the heat to defend their favorites, and that's what makes this deep dive so much fun. We're going to uncover some gems in these debates, maybe even arm you with some new arguments for your next fantasy draft or to settle those Barstool debates. To kick things off, let me throw this out there. One fan claims Jerry Rice might not just be the best receiver, but the best player, period.
Whoa, hold on. That's a bold statement.
Right. I mean, we're talking about a guy who basically rewrote the record books. Most touchdowns, most catches, most receiving yards. It's almost like he was playing a different sport. And then there's Randy Moss, the guy who seemed to defy gravity. And we can't forget about the passionate arguments for Don Hutson, a legend from a different era.
See, that's what makes this so interesting. We're talking about players from different decades, each playing in a different version of the NFL. Different rules, equipment, training, styles of play. It makes comparing them directly a real challenge.
Yeah, it's like trying to compare apples and oranges, right?
Yeah.
But even with those differences, some players just transcend their eras. Like Jerry Rice, his records are mind-blowing. And you know what's even crazier? There's this story about how he used to practice catching bricks as a kid. And guess what? His career catch-to-drop ratio was the highest ever.
So maybe those childhood drills really did pay off. It's a testament to his dedication and work ethic. But I think it raises a question. Is individual brilliance enough? After all, football is a team sport. It's about strategy, synergy, and adapting to the changing dynamics of the game.
Totally agree. You can't win a Super Bowl on talent alone.
Yeah.
But speaking of talent, can we talk about Randy Moss for a minute?
Mm-hmm.
The man was pure athleticism. There's a comment here that sums it up perfectly. It says, even with triple coverage, Moss would still snag the ball 60 yards downfield like it was nothing. And then there's this what-if scenario that some fans are debating. What if Moss had landed with the Patriots right after the Vikings, instead of those detours with the Raiders and Titans? Would his stats be even more insane?
That's a fun thought experiment, but it also highlights how important the right fit is. It's not just about individual talent, it's about the system, the quarterback, that synergy. Think about the iconic duos, Montana and Rice, Manning and Harrison. Each player elevated the other's game. They were like a perfectly synchronized machine.
So they dance, right? They have to be in sync to create something truly special. And speaking of dynamic duos, you can't forget about Terrell Owens. Love him or hate him, he was a difference maker. Took the Eagles to a Super Bowl, helped the Cowboys get back to the playoffs. He definitely left his mark on the game. Remember the catch, too. 3 drop passes in that playoff game, and then boom, game-winning touchdown with 3 defenders on him. Talk about clutch. But there's another interesting perspective on Owens in the comments. One fan says, as far as behavior goes, he's last on the list, but he knows his worth. It seems like people either loved him or loved to hate him.
It's a perfect example of how judging players goes beyond just the numbers. What was their impact on the team? Did they elevate their teammates? Were they leaders on and off the field? These are all factors that contribute to a player's legacy.
It's about the whole package. The talent, the personality, the impact. It's what makes this whole conversation so fascinating. Okay, let's shift gears for a second and talk about a receiver who, in my opinion, doesn't get enough credit. Cris Carter. His work in the end zone was legendary. One fan puts it perfectly. Cris Carter had the best hands of any wideout I've ever seen. No arguments here. It's interesting to compare him to a guy like Larry Fitzgerald, another fan favorite. There's this hilarious comment that says Fitzgerald could get 1,000 receiving yards, even with a trained zebra as quarterback, which, is a funny way of saying he excelled, even without consistently great quarterbacks.
That adaptability is incredible. To perform at such a high level, regardless of who's throwing you the ball, it says a lot about their work ethic, their talent, their ability to make the most of any situation.
For sure. It makes you appreciate just how crucial that quarterback-receiver connection is. All right, ready for a curveball? There's a passionate argument here for Don Hutson, a name that might not be familiar to everyone. He dominated the game back in the 30s and 40s, a true pioneer. One fan even claims none of these other guys would have jobs if it wasn't for Don Hutson.
That's a bold statement. But we have to remember that Hudson played in a completely different era. It was a different game. He revolutionized the wide receiver position, set numerous records, some of which stood for decades. And get this, he even played defense and led the league in interceptions.
Whoa, are you serious? Talk about a versatile player. And speaking of players who defied expectations, how about Lance Bambi Allworth? Played in both the AFL and the NFL, and this guy was fast, like ridiculously fast. One fan describes him as a bit of an athletic freak. And get this, they even compare Allworth's marketability to the AFL-NFL merger. They say if another Allworth came along today, with that kind of star power, they could start their own league and force another merger with the NFL.
Now, that's a fascinating thought. It speaks to the power of individual talent to reshape the entire landscape of a sport. And it highlights how the game has always been this blend of athletic prowess, strategic innovation, and, of course, entertainment.
I love that. Athletic prowess, innovation, and entertainment. That's the NFL in a nutshell. All right, let's do a quick rundown of some other big names on this list because we've got a lot of ground to cover. First up, Michael Irvin. The heart and soul of those dominant Cowboys teams in the 90s. Known for his physicality and his reliability, one fan even compares him to T.O., saying that Irvin caught everything thrown his way and was a true first-down machine. Then you've got Marvin Harrison, Peyton Manning's go-to guy in Indianapolis. Still holds the record for most receptions in a season. One fan calls him the second-best wide receiver after Jerry Rice, which is high praise. And, of course, we can't forget about Calvin Johnson, a.k.a. Megatron. An absolute beast, pure size and speed. One fan jokes that the Lions needed to get a better quarterback to unlock his full potential, which is probably a fair assessment.
It's interesting how a player's legacy can be influenced by the teams they play for. We've seen that with several players on this list, how the right team, the right system can elevate a player's game.
Totally. It's a reminder that even the most talented individuals need the right environment to thrive. Okay, back to our rapid-fire list. We've got Steve Largent, a master of consistency and route running. And he played in an era where the rules weren't nearly as favorable to receivers as they are today. One fan imagines that if Largent played today, we'd be talking about him as the greatest slot receiver of all time. Now, for those who might not be familiar, a slot receiver is basically
A receiver who lines up in the slot position, between the wide receiver and the offensive line. It's a position that requires a specific skill set, a knack for finding open space in the middle of the field and making tough catches in traffic.
Exactly. And this fan believes Largent had all the tools to dominate that position in the modern game. It's a fun thought experiment, isn't it? Imagining how these legends would fare in today's NFL. Okay, a couple more to go. We've got Tim Brown, a Raider legend who one fan argues should be in the top 5 for sure because of his stats and his ranking second to Rice in many major categories. And last but not least, Lynn Swann, known for his acrobatic catches and clutch Super Bowl performances. Remember that Super Bowl where he played with a concussion and still became the MVP?
It's incredible. The level of toughness and determination these players displayed, they weren't just athletes, they were warriors.
Absolutely. It makes you realize that there's so much more to this conversation than just stats and records. It's about the heart, the grit, the moments that transcended the game itself. Now, we've covered a lot of ground, but we can't forget about the other amazing receivers on this list. Guys like Steve Smith, Andre Johnson, and Isaac Bruce. Each one of them deserves their own deep dive.
And that's what makes this discussion so rich and multifaceted. It's not just about crowning a single champion, it's about appreciating the unique contributions each player made to the evolution of the wide receiver position.
It's about understanding the lineage, the passing of the torch from one generation to the next.
We're going to take a quick break here, but don't go anywhere. We've got so much more to unpack, including some fascinating fan takes on those hidden gems I mentioned earlier. We'll be right back.
We're back, and you know what? We're not done with this list yet. We've got some more receivers to talk about, guys who might not always top the all-time rankings, but who definitely left their mark on the game.
You know what I like about this part of the list? It challenges us to look beyond the obvious choices, the household names, to recognize those players who might not have had the flashiest stats, but who consistently delivered and made a real impact on their teams.
Right, like those unsung heroes. The guys who might not get all the headlines, but who were absolutely crucial to their team's success.
And speaking of unsung heroes, we got to talk about Steve Smith. This guy was a warrior, played with a chip on his shoulder every single game. One fan even called him pound for pound the toughest guy in NFL history.
And I can see why they'd say that. Smith was a smaller receiver, but man, he played with an intensity that was unmatched.
He was fearless, going over the middle, taking those big hits, never backing down. And, one fan brought up a great point. They said that Smith's ability to come up clutch in big moments, that's what truly sets him apart. And then there's Andre Johnson, another receiver who put up amazing numbers, even though, let's be honest, he didn't always have the most stable quarterback situation playing for the Texans. There's this comment that really stuck with me. It says, if he had a reliable quarterback, he'd probably be among the top 5 wide receivers, without question.
It's true. A quarterback's performance can definitely impact a receiver's legacy. We tend to focus on individual achievements, but we can't forget that football is a team sport.
It's a team effort. Everyone has to be on the same page. But even without a consistently elite quarterback, Andre Johnson still managed to establish himself as one of the best of his era.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He was a force to be reckoned with. Okay, one more hidden gem we gotta highlight. Isaac Bruce. Part of the Rams' greatest show on turf. Those teams were something else.
So explosive, they could score from anywhere on the field.
And Isaac Bruce was a key part of that offensive juggernaut. He might not have been the flashiest player, but he was incredibly reliable. Always seemed to be open, making those crucial catches. You know what's crazy? One fan pointed out that Bruce actually held the record for receiving yards in a season for a few hours, before Jerry Rice passed it the same day.
Oh, wow. Talk about bad timing.
Can you imagine being that close to a major record and then having it snatched away like that?
It's got to be bittersweet, but it also shows you just how dominant Jerry Rice was, for sure. It's a reminder that even in a sport obsessed with stats, there's so many untold stories, moments of greatness, that might not always make the headlines, like those hidden tracks on a music album, the ones you discover later. You're like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta dig a little deeper to find those hidden gems.
Speaking of digging deeper, let's go back to some of those bigger names for a minute. Because there's always more to learn, more to appreciate. We talked about Calvin Johnson, Megatron. And one thing that keeps coming up is that the Lions never really gave him a quarterback who could maximize his potential.
I mean, it's true. He had some decent quarterbacks, but never that elite Hall of Fame caliber guy.
Right. And it makes you wonder, does a receiver's legacy depend more on individual brilliance or on the team's overall success?
That's a tough one. I think it depends on what you prioritize. Some people value championships above all else, while others might focus on individual achievements and stats.
Yeah, it's all about perspective, what resonates with you as a fan. And it makes you appreciate players like Steve Largent even more. He didn't have the benefit of playing with a Hall of Fame quarterback or on a consistently dominant team, but he still carved out an incredible career, relying on his consistency, his precision, and those legendary hands. One fan even said that if Largent played today, with the emphasis on passing and the evolution of the slot receiver position, he'd be considered one of the greatest ever in that role.
Yeah, the slot receiver has become such a crucial part of modern offenses. It's fascinating to think about how those legends from different eras would adapt to today's game.
Right, would their skills translate? Would they thrive in these high-powered offenses?
It's like a time-traveling experiment.
I love it. Okay, a couple more names to touch on. Tim Brown, a Raider legend, who one fan argues should be in the top 5 for sure, because of his stats and his ranking second to Rice in many major categories.
And you know what? That's a valid point. Tim Brown was a complete receiver. He could do it all.
Absolutely. Stretch the field, make tough catches in traffic, even contribute in the return game. And his longevity was impressive. Played at a high level for a long time.
Which says a lot about his work ethic and his durability.
For sure. Okay, and last but not least, Lynn Swann. One of the most graceful and acrobatic receivers the game has ever seen. His Super Bowl performances were legendary, especially that one where he played through a concussion and still managed to win the MVP award.
That's insane. Talk about toughness.
He wasn't just about making those highlight reel catches. He was a competitor who wanted to win, no matter the cost.
And those catches, they were unbelievable, like something out of a movie.
He made it look so effortless, gliding through the air, making those impossible grabs.
It's amazing how each of these players brought something unique to the game.
Right, their styles, their personalities, their stories is what makes this discussion so much fun.
And so much more than just a ranking.
Exactly. It's about appreciating the legacy, the impact these players had on the game, and how they continue to inspire us today. It's like we've opened this treasure chest of wide receiver greatness.
And we've only just peeked inside.
Right. We could talk about these guys for hours.
There's always more to uncover, more stories to tell.
And I think that's what makes this whole discussion so captivating. It's not just about stats and records. It's about recognizing the impact these players had on the game and how they continue to inspire us today.
We've talked about the tangible things, the catches, the yards, the touchdowns, but what about the intangibles?
Oh yeah, those are important too.
The leadership, the clutch performances, the ability to elevate their teammates.
The heart, the grit, the determination.
Those qualities are harder to quantify, but they're just as important.
They're what separate the good from the great,
Ah,
and the great from the legendary.
absolutely.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought. Think about the young receivers in the league today, guys like Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. Where do they fit into this lineage of greatness?
It's a great question. They're already making their mark, breaking records, putting on a show every week.
It's exciting to watch, to see how they'll continue to develop and what kind of legacy they'll build.
It's a reminder that the game is always evolving. New stars emerge. New legends are made.
And the debate about the greatest wide receivers of all time will continue to rage on.
For generations to come.
And that's the beauty of it. There's no easy answer. It's all about perspective and having those passionate discussions. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed exploring the world of NFL wide receivers with us.
It's been a pleasure.
And hey, maybe you even learned a thing or two to impress your friends at your next watch party. Until next time, keep those conversations going. And stay tuned for more deep dives into the world of sports.